wanted to give you 30 minutes to ask your questions. We're a little bit behind, so if you want to go ahead and start.
Yeah, sure.
First, you may want to start with just having each person tell their name and give their name and title.
I'm Franklin Hill. I'm the Director of the Superfund Division, EPA Region 4.
Glenn Adams, Chief of the Technical Services Section, EPA Region 4.
Samantha Urquhart Foster, I'm the Remedial Project Manager for the CTS Nashville and the Superfund side.
I'm Sandy Moore. I'm a public health assessor with the North Carolina Division of Public Health, Department of Health and Human Services.
Ricky Langley, medical consultant, Department of Health and Human Services.
All right. How do you guys want to do this? Do you want to just have a quick, I have some questions, so I'd like to ask some questions. Or did you want to open with something? It's up
Well,
to
I think we can open with something. Actually, we're here tonight, of course, most of you know we're here to mainly talk to the residents regarding the CTS site and the most recent temporary relocation and the lowering of toxicity levels as it relates to TCE, which is what triggered the action the EPA took. So we're here to talk about the specifics of that and the ongoing investigation at the site.
Okay. Can I start with a couple of questions?
Sure.
All right. And I want to clear up the confusion for a prior report. I mean, that's my goal tonight, to just address that. We're not going to have a lot of time to do that. But there seems to be some confusion about this new limit of 2 micrograms per cubic meter. I was told by Ms. Foster, when the evacuations occurred on Friday a few weeks ago, that the EPA had received reports back, I think it was a Wednesday, and by the next day or early Friday, you guys decided to do a site-specific action level for TCE vapors. Is that correct? This
That's
is a new
correct.
thing. Okay. And then in the latest email I get, I'm learning that these levels were in effect in 2011. Can you clear up that discrepancy?
Yeah.
In 2011, EPA's Integrated Risk Information System made a change, Office of Regional Research and Development, and came out with new toxicity values that would have changed their number from 120 micrograms per liter, micrograms per cubic meter, to 6 micrograms per cubic meter. That's what we've been operating on. There's a lot more information that came over the last year in consultation with our headquarters, with consultation with our regional office out in California and Washington State, that have talked about this 15-day exposure for women of childbearing age, first trimester of pregnancy, that lowered that number down to 2 for a 15-day exposure.
When was that?
It's just been over time. It's just learning the toxicity values, reading more into it. So EPA Region 4 had never made a new site-specific or chemical-specific level 2 until we actually got this data, found out we had 2 residents that were of childbearing age. And so we made it specifically for this site and for that chemical at that time.
Okay, so Region 4 didn't have this in 2012.
No.
Correct.
Okay, so this level of 2 is brand new.
Yes.
And this 120 changing to 6, is that for indoor or outdoor?
Everything's for indoor, the
Indoor.
residents.
Okay, is there a level for outdoor?
No, it
No.
isn't.
There's no level at all.
Not a regulatory level, and we have no action level set for outdoor.
No action level set, okay. The air samples that were collected in Southside Village in 2012, according to the report sent to the residents, the outdoor ambient air samples ranged from 0.15 to 0.65. Where were those outdoor samples exactly located? Where were they collected?
One of the outdoor samples were collected between one of the residents and the Springs, which is, closest to Millsap Road. Another outdoor sample was taken a little farther up within Southside Village.
How close was it to a house? Just curious.
The one that was the highest concentration was between the Springs and a house.
Between the Springs and a house? Do you know how far from the house in feet, meters, any idea?
I can't tell you right off the top of my head.
Was it the same exact location as the 2008 testing?
I can't tell you off the top of my head.
So we don't know if the 2008 tests were in the same area as the 2012 tests. as
They were
relates to
similar.
the south
No,
side.
no, they were similar because the 2008 sample was an indoor or a crawl space and an outdoor. So they were very close.
Okay, they were done in crawl spaces,
In Southside Village
Yeah.
in 2012, it was crawl space and basement.
crawl space and basement. Did you do any indoor at all?
We did not.
In 2008, did you do crawl space and basement also?
Yes.
You did. Any reason why you wouldn't do indoor?
No, I mean, we start out, I mean, our process is to do outside air, crawl space, and then if there's an issue in the crawl space or basement, then we look to indoor air. We have kind of like a ratio of 1-to-1, so we would expect whatever is in crawl space would be similar to what's inside. What we found in recent sampling, when we did both outside crawl space and indoor, the concentrations are lesser inside typically than in crawl space and outdoor.
Are you doing crawl spaces and basements because you believed that it was coming from the soil, that the TC was coming from the soil?
Yeah, when we do vapor intrusion studies, which is what this is, the typical way it works is contaminated groundwater or soils, vapors come through it, so you sample sub-slab if it's a house on a slab, crawl space or basement, and you kind of tier up. The concentration should get lower the higher your sampling is.
But-
So that's the purpose of it.
But you understand the springs are the issue in this
Well,
area.
we knew the springs had an impact, that's why we do outdoor air sampling also. And which we saw from the 2012 study is the air closer to the springs had the most contamination and dropped off. Right now, we cannot tell, at least on the 2014 data, whether this is coming from vapor intrusion. We know it's coming from ambient air, but we cannot rule out that there's any impact from vapor intrusion. So once we get the solution, or a solution to the ambient air, then we can retest to make sure we don't have any vapor intrusion issues.
In the 2008 samples, though, they were, you know, they were high enough so that if somebody had their window open, this air with these vapors could have come inside the house in the living areas, and they would have been above your threshold. I'm just wondering why those, you wouldn't retest when you did in 2012, the inside living areas, in case somebody has their window open.
If the air outside, like in the crawl space, is not above the level, it wouldn't be indoor air.
You mean inside in the crawl space?
Yes.
But the levels in 2008, the 3.2 and 5.6,
We also resampled in 2012 in similar locations and they were less.
right, but that just shows that there's a fluctuation.
Correct.
I'm just saying that if you knew, you know, in 2011, that there were debates about, you know, what the threshold and level should be, and you said that if it was recommended back then to be 6, why wouldn't you have tested inside the houses, instead of just the basements of these particular homes?
If the basement and crawl spaces levels would have been above that level, that would have moved us to the next level of sampling inside the home. Anytime you sample inside a home, you add in a whole other range of sources that can come from normal household items in the house. And so it's hard when you sample inside a house to know where the source is. Is it coming from an outside source? So you have to do the outside ambient air, you have to do the crawl space, and that. So we took a step, processing ambient air, crawl space, based on those results to make a determination whether we need to go inside.
But knowing that the source may be primarily the springs, would that change it? Would that change your decision to keep doing crawl spaces and basements? Wouldn't?
Not necessarily.
No, I mean, crawl spaces and basements have opening air vents, you know, so we would expect a higher concentration in crawl space and basement with open air vents versus inside a home that is typically closed with central air and heat. Although we do have homes that don't have central air and heat.
The TC doesn't rise or fall?
Well, sure, yes, it does. It's going to be fall more than rise, but levels will go up. For an example, one of the homes we did in 2014, the ambient air had the highest concentration, the crawl space had the next, was a step lower, and inside was even another step lower.
Okay,
That's how we expect it to be in all houses.
Number of homes tested in 2008 in Southside Village?
I can't give you an answer off the top of my head.
Don't
I
know.
can't
And in
think of it.
2012? Any idea?
2012, there were 3 homes.
3 homes? And were they all located near the spring? The ones closest to the spring?
It was in Southside Village, and one was closest to the spring, and then we stepped back 2 more homes.
And did the one closest to the spring test the highest?
Yes,
It did, in 2012.
in 2012, it was the highest, but it was way below our actual level.
It was 5.6,
No,
and the
it was
outdoor air.
0.65.
Right, in the outdoor air.
In the ambient
Yeah,
air.
I know.
In the ambient air, it was 0.65 or 0.67.
In the crawl space.
Okay. In 2008, it was 6.5. Was it that particular home in 2008?
Yes, the same home was sampled. It's been sampled 3 times, 2007, 2008, 2012.
Any reason why you haven't chosen the other homes along the spring to test them?
No.
The highest outdoor samples in Southside Village from 2008 were near the springs. I guess the home you're talking about is on Silk Tree Lane. Is that correct? The one
I can't
closest to
answer
the
that.
springs?
The
Okay.
home closest to where the spring, where the water comes out the spring is the
Okay.
one that we tested. So we would expect a higher concentration there than anywhere else.
So in 2012, did you test the insides? I mean, no other inside areas of the homes, just a basement and crawl space?
Basement, crawl space in 2012.
And also in 2008, same thing, not inside, right?
Correct.
Any reason why? Just because that's your barometer, right? Is that what you said?
That's our goal, is we're looking at the ambient air and the crawl space to move inside a home.
Okay.
Yeah, if we get levels above an action level within a basement crawl space, then we would move inside. But we haven't seen that.
The residents are asking me why the EPA won't test if they have the windows open inside a house. That's why I'm asking. If the outdoor air was higher in 2008, why wouldn't, if somebody's going to have their window open, why wouldn't you test inside? That's what they're asking.
Okay, so in 2012, we did go out and we sampled outside and in the crawl space and basement.
Mhm.
The highest outside concentration was 0.67, which is less than or more than half below our action level.
Okay. Have you ever told residents to keep their windows shut?
No.
Okay, so in 2008, when the outdoor air was higher, there was no reason to tell people to keep their
In
windows shut?
2008, our action level was 120. So no, there would
Right.
be no reason we would have ever thought this would be an issue. In 2011, late 2011, when this changed, we started trying to get a process to get access to start sampling homes to make sure that changing the toxicity value did not give us a different result.
So because you didn't know back then, I guess.
We did not have toxicity values, we were only,
Right.
like I said, it was 120 is what we were looking at. We were well below any of those levels.
Anybody, have the community members been given a copy of this 2012 report yet?
Yes.
All the community members?
The people who were sampled, or sorry, I take that back. We didn't give them a copy of the report, but we gave them individually the results for their properties.
Only the people
And-
who were tested?
It's available, if anyone wants to request it, they're welcome to send a FOIA request. And we're in the process of uploading our website, the most commonly requested documents, and we'll be putting that on our website in the near
But
future.
right now,
Mike-
we have to go through the freedom of
Mike,
information.
I don't want anyone to get that issue blown out of proportion. The reason, we communicated directly with the residents specifically were for privacy issues, and it's consistent with our communicating data to residents. So that's the approach we took. I think we've been pretty transparent in the community and talking to folks about data results, and we'll continue to do that.
Did community members, talking about transparency, did they receive a copy of the SVE confirmation report?
That report, and Samantha, I know I'm getting in here into your field, but that report, we committed to release it once it had been redacted and once all of the data had been QA/QC'd. So our policy, again, is to only release finalized data that's gone through a quality assurance and quality control check, and that is redacted to protect personal identifying information.
So has it been released yet?
I think it has been.
Yeah, just recently.
Right.
The SVE confirmation? I haven't seen that.
I think it has been redacted, and I
Yeah, I just
saw a
received
couple of
word on
discs.
Friday.
Yeah, that we were releasing. So it was
How do I
just-
get a copy of that?
It was going through the
I can send
process,
you a
yeah.
copy.
Okay, that would help. Okay. The 6.3, this is something that's kind of throwing me off. Now I'm hearing that 6.3 is also regulations for the indoor air for children, for anybody who is not of childbearing years?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's what we would typically use. The special instance here for women of childbearing age, and it's where we can go down to the 2. And this is a chemical specific, something very unique to the toxicity studies for TCE.
I think we were confused because when the evacuations were happening, we just kept hearing 2, 2, 2. Nobody said 6.3.
It's because it was actually in the, well, I don't know if the memo went to public, but we had 2 families that had women of childbearing age, so technically at that point when we started taking action, it was irrelevant. I understand your question.
But what about Terry? I mean, you had another
Exactly.
family.
Terry
And
was-
he was a different situation, but he was above 6.3,
Right.
so he would still qualify for the temporary
Right,
relocation.
and we had
which is for
older
simplicity.
data from back in 2008 that he was also above 6. So we knew his exposure had gone on for more than a very short term, and so we went on and took the action for him also.
So
But it was
6
based on
years.
different reasoning.
Wow, so we know at least 6 years of exposure for Terry Rice.
We have detections in over a 6-year period. The good or the bad thing about air levels, same as water levels, data is in some cases, we do not know what it was during the.
And we were ready to
Periods of that
sample
time.
back in 2012, but
Glenn-
they didn't give us permission to sample.
And Mike, this is our 2-minute warning.
Okay.
Glenn, could you
I'd like to ask
also,
some questions.
just for your information, Mike, there's a difference here. And could you, for him, explain the difference between the cancer and non-cancer aspects of the new calculations, which is why the number went down?
Is this going to take my 2 minutes? Because I want to get my questions in.
Well, I
Well,
want to ask some
let-
questions too, if you don't mind.
We're done. I mean, we're out of here just a minute. I mean, I just want to know,
No, we have
2008
4 minutes.
reports released, the levels with the 2008 testing?
So you're not interested in hearing the
I
facts of the
am.
details
I
of the
just was
science?
given a 2-minute warning, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
all right.
2008 tests, were those released?
What do you mean, what they released?
Was the tests released to show what the levels were for all the community members of Southside Village?
2012?
2008, 2012, both.
I can't answer for 2008, I wasn't involved back then, but I mean, you can certainly submit the FOIA request, and property owners are made aware of the data.
Okay.
2012, I put out every 4 to 6 weeks community updates, and I included a summary of the information from 2012 sampling.
And Mike, if we have the data and it's been QAQC'd and redacted, it is releasable, and they can't get it if they don't have it.
Okay, you want to ask a question?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Could you talk more about the difference between the prior levels and the current levels? What's the legal change there with those levels?
It's not really a legal change, it's a health-based change. Prior to 2011, the only value we had was based on the cancer endpoint. That's the value that comes up to 120 micrograms per cubic meter for an action level. In 2011, when EPA published the toxicity values, we came up with, there were studies to base a non-cancer endpoint. That's what dropped the level to 6. 2 that we're talking about is actually just more conservative level based on a sensitive subpopulation. That's all that would impact is mothers in the first trimester of pregnancy.
Okay, grab those mics real quick. Yeah. And then did that come from EPA scientists or
Yes.
something else?
EPA scientists.
Okay.
It was published in September of 2011, the 6, or the value that would give us an action level of 6.
And can you just tell us how many people have been moved so far and how many more homes are being tested in the near future?
Yeah, there have been 13 people that have been temporarily relocated, and we are in the process of sampling 6 to 7 additional homes this week.
And can you tell us where the people who've been moved already are in the electricity plant as opposed to the people where you're testing now?
So the people we sampled closest to the springs, where we've been, the majority of their contamination is coming from, those 3 families were temporarily relocated. So what we're doing now is sampling kind of like an oval around that, the homes around there. And so we should get the results next week, and we'll communicate them first to the homeowners.
Okay, great. Is it specific neighborhoods that are being tested now?
No, it's just kind of an oval around the previous results that were elevated.
Okay, great.
Okay, we have time for 2 more questions.
Okay.
Can you give me an overview of what does it cost to do each of these tests in each home? What does it cost the EPA?
It doesn't cost us anything because CTS Corporation is doing the sampling and they have the information. I can't give you a cost estimate.
Can you give me a ballpark? Because a lot of people are wondering, why not test more homes? You said you tested 3 homes in 2008? Or, yeah, 2012, 3 homes?
In 2012, it was 3 homes. 2014, 3 more homes.
Why not more? That sounds like a drop
Because
in
we're
the bucket.
following we think the source of contamination is coming from the springs and we're following it outwards. So we did 3 in 2014 and now we're going to do additional 7 residents
There's
this
one
week.
question that residents have been asking, and that's how can AMET claim that there is no evidence of DNAPL when TCE is denser? And the levels of TCE have been found the highest at greater depths, 32 feet, 50 feet. How can that not be DNAPL?
They don't deny that it's NAPL. Whether it's DNAPL or LNAPL is a different issue. But they admit there's NAPL there.
I know, but
And
but
so
it's
our
in
next
the
step is
report.
to address the NAPL.
In the report,
Whether
it
it's
actually says.
DNAPL or LNAPL, it doesn't really matter.
In the report, it actually says there is no DNAPL. We have not found DNAPL, and we know that TCE is heavier and denser, so how could, 830,000 parts per billion, 1.1 million parts per billion, which is setting down below on the bedrock, how could that not be DNAPL? It's gravity.
It's not on the bedrock.
Okay, it's down
It's
below
in
the
there.
groundwater.
It's mixed in. TCE affiliates itself more with petroleum products than water. It's in there. We know there's heavy contamination, and so we're working on addressing a cleanup plan. for
But
that.
are you saying that there is no DNAPL?
I'm not saying that. We haven't finished reviewing the report.
But it did say in the report that we found no evidence of DNAPL, and the greatest concentration of TCE has sunk below the water and is setting in an area clumped together. It has sunk. Gravity has taken it down to the bottom. Isn't that just the definition of DNAPL?
It's mixed throughout the water zone, so it's NAPL for sure.
But it's sunk. That's what I'm saying. The highest levels have sunk.
Mike, I would add to that, that's their report. We are reviewing it.
Okay.
We will certainly weigh in once we get enough additional information to make that conclusive decision about whether or not we have DNAPL and what depths it actually exists. I think that is the whole idea behind the remedial investigation that we want to launch to get a full understanding of it.
And there's no question, but you said you were going to comment on the investigation.
Well, my point on the investigation is that I think the agency has taken the appropriate action when warranted based on the evidence that has been made available to us. The most recent action, which is the one that I think has most people concerned, centers around the temporary relocations. And as we tried to explain to you here, we made those decisions based on the best available science and the lowering of the toxicity levels to TCE. And so there is a time period there when you can look at when investigations were taken in the Southside Village where we didn't really have levels that would warrant an action or levels that would be of a level that we would be concerned about. There's also evidence of when we took samples in 2007 and 2008. They gave us some indication that we had high levels at the spring. There was a consistent removal action along with that gave people notice that those levels there, and we warned them and we tried to keep people away from the springs at that point in time. But even then, with the 120 micrograms per cubic meter, we did not have a residential action to take based on those numbers. That was an indicator for us to come back and do additional work. And as you know, the investigation and looking at the timeline, was delayed for that area that's closest to the spring. We just recently got the access, and once we received that access to go on site and do that sampling and to conduct that sampling, we did that. And when we got information, we were accountable and responsive, and we came back to this community and communicated it to them. That's what we've done the entire time, and we'll continue to do that.
If the 2008 and 12 tests can be released so we can see exactly where these canisters were, I think it would really help so we know what we can report.
Well, the issue there for us is we're always juggling, being protective of our citizens. And I know they're talking to you, as you've already indicated. They're asking you questions. You're asking us questions. We want to try to give them the answers to those questions. We want to talk to those individual residents. They will be the first ones to get that information. As they give us access, and once we get data, we will communicate with those people directly. What we try to avoid is the situation that I think we currently have here right now, is that I think we have panic, and I think we have panic for a number of different reasons. Number one is air. It's something that you can't see, and in some cases you can't smell. So that issue would concern folks. But from a technical perspective, we're following those indicators to determine where we would sample to give us an indication of whether we need to do additional sampling. So we're following the process. We're going to the sources where we think the highest concentrations exist, and we're going outward. As we identify additional areas that we need to sample, we'll certainly do that.
Yeah, the concern I'm getting is that, the levels fluctuate day to day, and you guys do 24-hour canister testing. How, one day the levels could be high, one day they could be low, just depending on the direction of the wind.
Here's the issue.
And then in 2008, you test along the springs, you find high levels outside, but in 2012, we don't know if you did the same areas. We don't know.
Well, here's the issue. It's not about, whether or not we're trying to mislead people. The real hard facts are associated with, quite frankly, water table levels. In some areas, as well, we have some areas along the spring that are artesian. They're coming to the surface. We have water levels that fluctuate up and down, and so at different depths, and that will give you a different concentration at a different time. So this is not an exact science, but we're trying to do the best that we can to get a handle on it.
Okay, we're gonna wrap it up.
It sounds like you're trying to get the public educated, particularly in this community that seems to be the one that's more anxious. There's a lot of homes for sale. What do you want to get across tonight? What are you hoping to do? Because I think whether it's information, misinformation, there's a lot out there. When somebody hears air quality and there's an issue, they run for the hills. So what do you want to tell these homeowners? There's hundreds of them in there.
I think we want to tell folks that based on the data that we have made our decisions based on the best available science. And if we had an indication that the larger population was at risk, we would certainly identify them as soon as possible. It would not be some long period of time. We would let people know. What we're trying to find out is that is it on a larger scale based on the last and most recent data that we collected?
And what are you seeing so far with that latest data?
Well, you want to respond to that?
It's being collected this week.
Yeah.
And we'll
then
have results next week.
when will you have results on the latest test?
Next week.
What day?
I can't give you a day.
Yeah.
We're sampling this week, we'll get data next week. And our obligation is to notify the property owners first, and then we'll release it.
And just, I'm sure there's a lot of information. How many homes are you testing, or what areas are you testing right now?
We're going to be sampling, I think it's 7 homes that surround the 3 homes that we temporarily relocated, and additional outdoor air samples that cover a couple other neighborhoods nearby.
Okay. Well, that concludes the press availability this afternoon. Thank you guys for coming out, and you all would go ahead and disperse. We will go ahead and end this.